Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. I haven't had a basement in a home in a long time, but I don't know. I think that it's places I've lived. I've tried to get inexpensive houses, and most of those are ranches that are built back in the 60s, maybe late 50s. And I do like them, but for the most part with ranch style homes that are built during that period of time, they only have a crawl space. And crawl space in and of itself gives me chills because I always think of John Wayne Gacy, right? But most of them have crawl spaces. But I don't have a basement. I haven't had a basement in a long time. And of course that comes with problems, doesn't it? Anyone that has one, you think about flooding and think about having to go up and down those stairs. It'd be nice to have one though. Always wanted to have a man cave. Never had one of those. But today I want to talk about the basement of not just a standalone home, but a condo, which is kind of interesting. And about a man that occupied that space for some period of time. He called it home. That's where he hung his hat and his car keys. But that home was also occupied by someone else, or should I say, the remains of someone else. Because when they finally found out what was in the basement, it's something that I can only imagine the finders will be scarred by for the rest of their lives. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. You like your basement, Dave? You got a basement, don't you?
I have not really the traditional basement, Joe. I have I have a tri-level home.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so when you go down to the basement area, the garage, it's like this 2.5 car garage, but it's at the lower level of everything.
Gotcha.
And so technically, yeah, you go downstairs, you could be the basement, but no, I've never actually had a basement. I've always had a lower level in the house over the last couple houses, but I've never actually had the traditional basement, And but I do have a place where I could have a man cave, but now I don't need one anymore. I mean,
Well, that's
my whole
true.
house is a man cave now. But the thing about this one, Joe, the thing that got me in this particular case, we're dealing with a man named Matthew Lewinski.
Yes.
And Matthew Lewinski, at the time this took place, is a 37-year-old man. Now, he is living in his father's condo, and it has a basement. He's living in his father's condo because his dad has some medical issues, and Matthew's sister is the guardian. She's taking over everything, all of her dad's affairs.
Gotcha.
To give you an idea, the dad he was dealing with a lot of medical issues, Joe, and he did pass away. But right after this happened. Now, when Matthew is living in this condo, he also has a girlfriend that he meets in April of the year that we're dealing with, okay?
Gotcha.
And she moves in with him. So you've got Matthew and his girlfriend. Her name is Courtney Jerri Winters. Courtney moves in with Matthew Lewinski. Now, the problem here is that Matthew's been there for a couple of years, and he hasn't been real communicative with the family about anything. And at one point, now you got to remember, this is not his condo. He's living in the condo that's owned by his dad. His dad has a guardian. That would be Matthew's older sister. Now, here's your quag, Joe. You ready?
I'm ready, brother. Hit me.
Based on the family's interaction with Miss Winters,
Yes.
the guardian was paying for the utilities from the dad, Anthony Lewinski. Everything was still in his name. And so Matthew's not paying for anything.
Wow.
Somebody else is
Wait, hang on. How old is
Yeah.
this child?
He is 37 at the time this takes place. Yeah,
Gotcha.
37 years, late 30s, and he's living in his dad's condo. His
Right.
dad has a guardian because he is not capable of, being on his own. Anyway, so it's one of those situations where, based on how this plays out, other family members are doing fine. Nobody is really interested in this condo. It's dad's, and when dad is gone, we'll probably let it go, which
Yeah.
they did. But in the meantime, little brother is living in the condo and everybody else is footing the bill for things. It got so ugly that his girlfriend, at one point, in one of the very few exchanges the family had with this girlfriend, she was yelling and screaming at them on the phone, threatening to call the police over them paying the power bill on time. You're living rent-free, and in somebody else's house, they're footing the bill for your utilities, and you're threatening with calling the police for family members to pay the utility bills for your boyfriend. Think about that for a minute.
Well, it seems like a small price to pay to have a free roof over your head and the comforts which come along, because this is up in Michigan, so they're going to need heat, right?
Yeah.
They've got electricity.
Yeah.
It seems that, probably in this person's mind, probably an argument is a small price to pay to be able to continue to sponge along with the sun.
That's the
Small
sponge, right.
investment, man.
Yes.
Yeah, I can stand yelling and screaming. I can even, even threaten you with being arrested. But
if you don't pay my power bill, I'm calling the cops.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyhow, this is what happened, Joe. Matthew Lewinski is not talking to the family. He's not letting them come in. As a matter of fact, sister comes over to check on the condo, and he won't let her come in the house. No, stay away. But the girlfriend, Miss Winters, she gets into a rugby with him in November. Okay, now they met in April, started dating. She moves in with him. By November, they're having so many fights over bills, she moves out. She comes back a couple of weeks later to pay a visit on Mr. Lewinski. And in that visit, she says, hey, I had an abortion. You wanted to have a child? I had an abortion. Apparently, he goes into the kitchen to make some tea. When he comes back, she's sitting naked in the recliner, and he proceeds to strangle her, Joe. Matthew Lewinski strangles Miss Winters to death in the recliner. He put his hands around her throat, or no, one hand on her throat for 5 minutes and strangled the life out of this woman.
Let me ask you something. In between the time he left the room and went into the kitchen, did her clothes just miraculously fall off? Was there a gravitational force that just kind of pulled them off? It's an interesting interaction, I think, that she has not been there. She comes back, and they were fighting prior to. She comes back into this dwelling, and this pronouncement that she makes, oh, by the by, I had an abortion. And then he leaves the room, her clothes are off. I don't know. First off, I think, one of the big questions I would have is, did she in fact actually have an abortion? I don't know if there's any way that you could, validate that. And what's the proof of this? Do you think that perhaps she was needling him in some way? I mean, it kind of sounds that way to me. I don't know.
The sad reality, Joe, is the entire story that I just told you comes from Matthew Lewinski.
Wow.
Yeah, he's the only source.
Gotcha.
The only source for our story comes from the man who admits he put his left hand around her throat and choked the life out of her for 5 minutes, that he choked her until she stopped squirming. So kind of put an asterisk, next to this story, because he's trying to create a story that justifies him killing a woman he's involved with. And he thinks in his brain that, again, he's having to come up with something, to justify the murder of somebody. And he thinks in his mind, well, if I was told that she had an abortion, that would drive me to murder. That's justifiable homicide. That's all I can think of. But what happens next, Joe, is the reason we're talking about the story, believe it or not.
As if that wasn't enough.
Okay,
go ahead, hit me.
You always talk about the shovel, and at the bottom of that,
Yeah,
well, break out the shovel because we got deeper to go.
Okay.
After killing Ms. Winters, Lewinski drags her body down to the basement. He then begins to, I don't know when he did it, but at some point in time, he starts hacking away at her body. He starts removing large swaths of skin from her back. And he leaves her in the basement on a tarp, and then goes back upstairs and resumes life. This is from Matthew Lewinski's story. Now, living in a condominium complex where you have neighbors that are nearby, neighbors close enough to say, hey, yeah, we heard them arguing over money. We heard those arguments, which, that's bad. But then they don't see her. She's moved out, supposedly, and they have this smell. Now, you've talked about the smell of human decay and how you really can't tell the difference in decay from human to animal and things like that. The decay is decay, right?
Yes.
And neighbors talked about maybe it's trash, that's gone bad. There's any number of things, but neighbors notice. They notice enough that one of the neighbors, Joe, says that when she would get out of her car, she would pull her shirt up over her nose to go running inside of her condo.
Holy smokes.
That's how bad the odor was. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm living somewhere like that, I'm calling somebody. Hey, man, something's gone wrong, really wrong. But nobody did. It took 7 months, Joe. 7 months.
So just so that I'm understanding this, I'm tracking here.
Okay.
The neighbors had actually been aware of the smell, and they were, it was indwelling. Were they able to pin it down to Lewinski's actual apartment? I think, is that the source? Is that the origin? Because, it would, I got to tell you, and this is just my own perspective, I'm banging on somebody's door.
Right.
First off, I want to know if you're dead and are you in there? That's just me. I'm a death investigator.
Right.
I want to know what's going on the other side of that door, because the odor is so incredibly foul. And if not, I want to know what is dead, because it's impacting my life, particularly if condos, which might abut each other, and that's generally the definition of condo. That smell can leach through the wall, right? So if I'm smelling that while I'm laying in bed, I've just gotten out of the bathtub. I've had a nice, refreshing, hot soak, to wash off all the worries of the day. I've got my satin robe on. I got my pipe in my hand and my silk slippers, and there I am. And I'm not smoking the pipe because I enjoy the smell of the pipe. I'm trying to mask the odor that's coming through. And this can happen. I've actually worked cases like this where people were just going about their own business. And I even write about a story in my memoir that I think the title of the chapter is called Red Beans, is the name of it. And it had to do with a guy that had died in a bathtub in New Orleans, and he was decomposing, and the water was dripping through the ceiling. And it was a single mom and her son, and they had been alerted to the smell, and they had complained to the landlord about this. And my friend, who was a police officer, showed up at the scene. I was there. We went down to interview her, and we looked up on the ceiling. There was this gigantic water spot. And in New Orleans, for folks that don't know, Mondays are red beans and rice day. And there's a long history about red beans and rice in New Orleans. So I'm personally, when I make my red beans, I'm a long soak guy. And people in South Louisiana know what that is. I soak my beans for 24 hours. I put half a cup of red wine in, a little bit of garlic, and I just let it sit. But that's another show for another time. This poor mother, I'll never forget it, who lived there with her son. We walked in, wet spot on the ceiling, and the water from the tub with the rotting body is dripping right into her soaking beans.
Oh.
And I know, right? And so you have this communication that goes on. By the way, the story ended interestingly. My friend that was a detective back then, this was in the 80s. She didn't have any money, single mom, she's working. He gives her $20 and says, dinner's on the sheriff's office tonight. Y'all go. And he did something that is kind of foreboding. If you're in South Louisiana and you have a red bean pot, which is very specific, I mean, you use it only to soak your beans and cook them in.
Wow.
We both took the pot out and put it in the dumpster. And we left her another $20 to buy another pot, and we left her a note.
Oh my God.
And I remember him going to the landlord that was there and literally putting this guy up against the wall. He said, "Let me tell you something. This better be repaired by tomorrow. You've got this woman with a small child. Get out here, fix this immediately, and tell her not to use that stove. As a matter of fact, we prefer that you replace the stove as well." And, and the landlord's like, like this. But, that's one of those little things. And when you're living in a non-detached environment, and there's people that can tell stories like this. I'm not the only one. All over the place. I'm sure that our friends out there have stories like you've heard some of the most horrible things come through your wall. And I've had that happen too. And I'm thinking, I'm paying money for this.
Right.
I don't want to hear what's going on next door at all. I don't want to hear what's going on above me,
Right.
But anyway, you think about this, and what's interesting is how these things are put together, these dwellings, because when you occupy a space that, let's face it, the only thing that's separating you is, sheets of sheetrock, gypsum, and it's coming through, it's permeating. Maybe you have a shared air handler. Maybe that smell cycles through that building. But I can tell you this, there's one thing you can never escape. First off, death is coming to us all, but when you're near it, you can never escape the smell of death. Dave, this might be, well, I won't say it's the most disgusting case we've ever covered because we've really covered some disgusting things.
Yeah.
However, it is troubling, I think.
You're being mild. You're being mild there, buddy.
It is. And I really set the tenor with the story about the red beans, right? But
hey, let me ask you a question. Before we go too much further, I got to ask you this, though, because you mentioned, and that red beans story is important. You and I are going to talk about that if we get done.
Yeah.
But, sure. All right. Is it possible? I'm giving you an example. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, and you come in on I-26 to go into Charleston, and I-26 at Montague is where I remember smelling the paper mill, which has a very specific smell.
Yes, it does.
That it hits you big time when you get there. And you think I can't live here. This is enough to not live here.
I know what you're about to say.
In a matter of days, you don't recognize it anymore. You don't even smell it. It's not that way with decaying flesh, is it?
I don't think it is. My granny also had 2 paper mills in the town up in North Louisiana that were, when the wind was right, you wouldn't smell it every day, but you kind of get used to it. It becomes part. And I've had people say to me that are in the paper industry, they'll say that funky odor is the smell of money. And it truly is, and a place depends upon the mill, to keep, to keep things going and whatnot. But the smell of death, though it's very difficult to differentiate between, say, animals and humans. It always has been for me. Maybe some people have more discriminating olfactory senses, perhaps. But I don't, because I've been adjacent to rotting animals and rotting humans, and I can't really tell the difference. And I've been around a lot of decomposing bodies. I don't think that it's something that you necessarily warm up to, or that just becomes, because let me tell you this also, even though I wouldn't say, it would be an overstatement to say that I was around a decomposing body every single day that I worked at the ME's office. That's unreasonable. You can't say that. I did go into the decomp room at least every other day. And when I would enter there, and that smell, no matter how much you scrub it, that smell is always there. That's where we store the decomp bodies. And then when I would go on scenes, Again, I would have to get acclimated to it.
Wow.
And I would force my way through it just in my brain to say, okay, this is the reality of what I'm doing. And I had to
Right.
do this early on in my career, because if you get distracted by the smell, you're going to miss details. And if you're missing details, you don't need to be an investigator, period, end of paragraph. So it's not something. I will tell you this. I've had people that smelled differently than other people in stages of decomposition. And I think it goes to stages, and it also goes to the environment.
Okay.
It's if you put two bodies adjacent to one another and say in a controlled environment, and they're in the same environment, and the bodies are decomposing at the same rate,
Right.
I don't know that you could differentiate between it.
Okay.
But depending upon the stage that the body is in, and listen, it actually waxes and wanes though. Okay.
What do you mean?
Like as it is starting, as the putrefaction phase is starting, you've got the autolytic phase, the autolysis rather, that's going on within the body. After that leaches out and the putrefaction is taking place, it's beginning to ramp up that smell, but
Okay.
it will begin to slowly wane over a period of time. Now, I've been in crypts, I've been under houses where I have skeletal remains, and you won't smell decomp. A dog probably could.
Wow.
It's got kind of a musty odor to it many times, and I would have to ask myself, does it smell musty because I'm in a basement, or I'm adjacent to a body that, I'm digging out of a wall in a basement, or in a crypt, where a body is being exhumed, or is this actually just the natural smell, that would come along with it?
Okay.
But it does go through phases, I'd have to say. And I think that with our case today, I'm curious if the smell ever did begin to wane, Dave.
Well, Joe, one of the things that I paid attention to in this was I was trying to figure out, you have a number of people besides the neighbors. You have family members of Matthew Lewinski that were concerned about the state of the home, of the condo. It was owned by their father, Anthony, and he was not doing well. So they
Right.
needed to know the state of his property.
Yes.
Now, Matthew living there, I'm sure they probably felt, and I know I would have, I've been like, well, at least there's somebody manning the fort. There's somebody there. But here's the catch. We already have, well, you guys know what the neighbors didn't know, is that Matthew Lewinski kills his girlfriend. She's now in the basement. Her body is there. And 7 months go by. Now, during this time period, Joe, the whole time Lewinski is living in the house, his sister is trying to not just get up with him, but they're looking for a very specific Christmas ornament. It's a ceramic Christmas ornament that it's important to the family. I think we all have something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this sister was trying to find it, and it was in the basement. They believed it was in the basement of the home. And Matthew would not let his sister inside the home, would not let her in the condo. So it is the night of July 26th, and neighbors call police because Matthew Lewinski is outside of his condo in this communal area, walking around in his underwear. Nothing else, just underwear. I don't know about you. That's not something that happens around my house. So
No.
I would probably call the law too.
Yeah.
They did. Now, Matthew Lewinski taken away for observation. They take him to the police, show up, they take him to the hospital because that's just not normal behavior. And while he's gone, of course, all the neighbors know, and the condo people, they all, running the show there, they know that he has been taken away. There's nobody living in the condo at the moment, and the lights are on. No, lights are on, nobody's home.
Yeah.
So the condo association reaches out to Matthew's sister. Okay, now, again, I was clear on this, that it is the sister, Debra Federico, who is the guardian. She's in charge of Dad's stuff,
Right.
of Anthony. Now, Debra gets the phone call from the condo association, and they're like, hey, your brother was taken to the hospital last night, and just want you to know that, there's nobody there, but the lights are on. And so Deborah's like, I'll take care of it. So she and her husband and her son, and a close family friend, they all go to the house, to the condo. And Now they're looking at it as we can turn the lights off, but we can look for the ceramic Christmas thing we want.
Yeah.
Without having to worry about Matthew. And so that's where they go in. They're not thinking they're going to find anything weird, but just in case, considering the fact that Matthew was taken away to the hospital for observation for mental issues, Debra stays outside. She lets her husband, son, and family friend go inside the house with instructions. Think about it. She's probably getting the information about this ceramic Christmas ornament from her dad, telling her, yeah, it's in the basement. So they specifically went in to turn out the lights and go to the basement to find this ornament. Now, when they go in, Debra's husband is on FaceTime with her so she can see and kind of direct them as to where to go. When they get to the basement, Debra's husband sees something. Arms and legs. He stops looking. He doesn't go any further. He knows that these are arms and legs. They are not of a mannequin. They're not a doll because they're human. And he backs out and they call the police. That's it. For the family did not go back in there, Joe. The family, they saw this and they backed up. So the family members of Anthony Lewinski, they do not go into that home any further. Matthew Lewinski is in the hospital. Police show up and they determine we have a body. And Joe, this is not fresh. This body on the floor, face down, on top of a tarp, is nude, and somebody has removed large swaths of skin from the back of this corpse. That's what police walked into.
Wow.
Joseph Scott Morgan, have you ever been called to that?
No. I've got to tell you, I haven't. Now, from an academic standpoint, I would have liked to. I would have liked to have been able to observe something like this and try to interpret it there in place, okay, before the body is ever removed, so that I could contextualize it.
Hey, would that happen? Would they would do that, right? I mean, they know the body said they would not touch, move, or anything other than
they would wait for the medical examiner to come out.
Okay.
And Michigan actually has medical examiners. They don't have a coroner system. Okay. So you would have the ME investigator or the representative come out there. This is probably one of those cases, if I could get my hands on a forensic pathologist. And Michigan's kind of interesting. Their system's regionalized up there. Sometimes they'll have ME investigators depending upon the size of the jurisdiction. This is Macomb County, I think, which is just
outside of Detroit.
Yeah, suburban Detroit.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they do a fine job. But yeah, the reason I'm saying this is that I would want to have the forensic pathologist out there along with an ME investigator. Just so that they can contextualize the body to know what they're going to be dealing with when they get the body back to the morgue, because this body would be the upside from an investigative standpoint is the body is not buried. Okay, you've got an exposed remain, so you can pretty much, if you blast it with light in there, you can get an idea of what you're dealing with. And, one of the more important things that happens with the medical legal personnel at a scene is not merely just the examination of the remains and the context in which the body is found. It's also the removal of the remains in the sense of how the mechanics of how this is done, because things are easily lost. So you have to, and I'll give you an example because I know this because you mentioned it. This body was face down. Okay, on this tarp, because if I remember correctly, the family that had gone down stated they couldn't see the face. Okay,
right.
That leads me to believe the body is in a prone position. I am not, under any circumstances, going to roll that body over. Curiosity killed the cat, and this is a prime example of this. I know that I'm dealing with something that is highly complex. I've already got the body contained on a tarp. I'm also not going to pull the tarp from beneath the body.
Wow.
So what we would do is I would, as gently as possible, fold this tarp. Okay. You run the risk of transferring things on the periphery of the chart of the tarp onto the body. They're on the edges, but I would gently fold this over, try to secure it. Then I would put a white sheet, a clean white sheet inside of an open body bag. I would transfer in total the remains in a face down position, okay, into the bag, and then envelop the body in the clean white sheet, or the tarp and all inside the clean white sheet, depending upon how big the tarp is. All right. Is it manageable? Now, people don't realize there are oversized body bags. Most medical examiners have them because we have people that are really big many times. And so I would probably use one of those and zip that body up, transport the body in that state so that you do as little as you possibly can to alter the pristine nature of the position of the body, and get the body back to the morgue and essentially unwrap it level by level to do the examination. Because Dave, you're already saying that what they could see at the scene were large patches of skin that have been removed. And I know that our friends out there know what I'm about to say, because you've all seen the movie. This is Thomas Harris. This sounds exactly like Silence of the Lambs with the character Buffalo Bill, where he would try to go after larger women or increase their size by feeding them, and then kill them and skin them. And he would take off of the back. And because Dave, I got to tell you, I don't recall. I know that there are cases where bodies have been skinned over the years, but this is very specific, where you're going to the posterior chest, the back, and you're slicing away skin. I think one of the other questions that I would have, where's that skin? What what did you do with it?
I knew you were going to ask me.
Is it laying about somewhere else? I don't know.
I don't know. And Joe, I was trying to find something that would indicate why this was done, what was going on. But again, now remember, we know that Matthew Lewinski is, at the time they're finding the body, is in the hospital.
Right.
Because of a mental, psychological, something's going on with him. And the thing is, he's been living with the decomposing body of his former girlfriend for 7 months. I mean, that's going to play on you a little bit, I would think.
Yeah, I would think so too. And run around the front yard with your drawers, here's your sign. Kind of an interesting perspective. But I think the more interesting perspective here is to try to understand exactly what did the medical examiner find, or should I say, what was left that they could examine and find evidence of back at the morgue. Dave, when you handle a case like this in the medical legal community, this is not something that is lightly undertaken. You'll have time, and I've done this many times over the course of my career. You call back to the office and you say, this is what we have coming in, and this is not some standard, somebody got shot on the sidewalk and we're going to, collect the remains after we document the scene. We're going to run back and we're going to do the autopsy and go through all that. No. This is one of these things where it's kind of an all hands on deck. It's like, well, first off, we're going to go ahead and heat up the x-ray machine. Right.
Right.
And we've talked about this before. I'm x-raying that body in the bag before I ever open the bag at all, because we know that there's an instrument involved in this. Now, this might be just a post-mortem event, but I can't, if you're kind of walking around, in the dark without a cane, because you don't have the story, the narrative fully yet.
Mhm.
So from the top of the head to the soles of the feet, we're going to do a full body X-ray, in the bag, and before we ever open it, because what I'm looking for are any evidences. First off, I don't know if the person's been shot or not. I might have
Oh, wow.
a lead trail that's in there. Plus, if they're decomposed, you're not going to be able to pick up on what may or may not be firearms related defects in the body. So you look for those lead storms. We call them lead storms, and it's like where projectile might fragment.
Okay.
I'm also going to look for the tips of knife blades. I'll even look for knife blades that might be broken off in the body, because you've got somebody here that has desecrated the dead. Okay, this is not, and they've abused a corpse. So you can't take the measure of that. You can't take the measure of what they did, what instruments they used. So you never know what's left behind in the body. And you say, well, Morgan, what's the purpose of the x-rays? Well, the purpose of the x-rays, first off, is to use them in court. But I think the overarching view here is, if there's anything there, I have to have a roadmap. That's why doctors use x-rays and any kind of imaging when they're treating you, right? I mean, we've all been through x-rays and MRIs and CAT scans and all those sorts of things. That's a roadmap for, so if there's got to be some kind of surgical intervention, you want to know where you're going, right? You have to, and so before you just go in there blindly, with instruments looking for something, you don't know what's there. That's one of the things that we do. The toughest thing, what one of the toughest things about x-raying through a body bag is, with a body inside of it, are discerning between the zippers and the rivets. And then also if they're wearing clothes.
Right.
Because you'll see like a pair, I'm thinking Levi's right now, and the metal buttons and the zipper, and then the rivets, that you have on the pockets, the watch pocket that, is in a traditional pair of Levi's. You come across those little things, but you learn how to discern, like, okay, that's garment related. It's not necessarily, associated with that.
Joe, let me ask you, because we know the story, and I was trying to be clear on this when I was telling the story of what happened, because we're only getting one side of the story, and it's coming from the suspect, Matthew Lewinski. We only have what he told police from his hospital room after he had the mental issue, whatever you call that. And when you're looking at the remains, in this case, where based on what Lewinski has said, or you think how long the remains have been down there, is there a way to determine when this actually transpired? Because he could be lying. He might not be telling you the truth. Is there a way, looking at this body, to know when or about when this person met their end?
I think so. I bet you're surprised I'm saying that. But I think so, because this is not a body that's been cast adrift in the wilderness. It's not even a body that's been placed into a clay bank underneath a house and buried in the backyard. Okay.
Oh, wow.
This is a body that is laid out on, I'm assuming, the concrete floor of a basement slab on a tarp. Now, the only problem that you're going to run into that might compromise anything, if there's any rodents in the house, and yes, rodents feast on the dead. So you can disabuse yourself of the thought that you've got a cute little mouse that's around, or, we all know about rats, right? So yeah, they do. They do. And then you've got flies that would have come in with maggot development, and you're going to have all of that stuff to deal with too, all the husks that are lying about. But Dave, the body, that in and of itself is going to give you, and of course we have to look, we can't believe everything he's saying, but up to this point, he's actually saying, yeah, I choked her out, and yes, she was nude. Those are two things that you might be able to confirm. We know at least that he's saying that he choked her out. He's not fleeing from that. Okay.
Yeah. And he even said how long he choked her. He actually,
my Lord.
And he said he held her with his left hand for 30 seconds. And they mentioned 30 seconds as in that she was really struggling, but he continued. And I don't know if he did this like, I'm a man, I did it with one hand. I don't know what the point is, but
Yeah.
he did say, telling police, that he continued to hold her for 5 minutes until she stopped moving, until she stopped breathing. And so he knew she was dead. He strangled the life out of this woman
Yeah.
with one hand. And I want to remind you of something.
Yeah.
They met in April. They had several disagreements. She moved in with him very quickly. And this happened in December, Joe. They
Okay.
didn't know one another for a full 12 months before he is able to use one hand and take the life from her body.
I'm really wondering if this was some kind of psychosexual thing that went on. I wonder what their relationship is like. Because, that's going back to the idea that he leaves the room, he comes back and she's nude.
Yeah.
And I've wondered if this was some kind of maybe sex play that had occurred early on, or, something to that effect. Because, the choking part of this that you're describing, that's what's referred to as a C-clamp.
Really? I can't,
Yeah.
wait a minute. I cannot believe that has a daggone
Yeah, it's a
name.
C-clamp. Yeah, it's a C-clamp. That's
Wow.
what it's referred to as.
Just wow.
And most of the time when you have somebody that is trying to commit a homicide, vis-a-vis strangling, they're going to use throttling. This is called throttling, where you use both hands either from the front or the back. The C-clamp thing sounds like a control thing. Now, you can kill somebody, doing this, because you can actually, one of the things you can do is you can crush the larynx in here, the actual, windpipe by doing that. But you're also compressing, say, the carotids right here, and the carotids supply oxygenated blood to the brain. And so the person will, die of anoxia, essentially. Now, here's the trick. The condition of the body is fascinating to me when you think about what's left behind. Now, we know that there is enough left behind so that whoever is observing her, they can actually appreciate that there are cut marks on the back that kind of define that skin has been removed. This is not like she's turned into, and forgive me for saying this, into some kind of soupy mess.
Yeah.
There are still lines of delineation here, okay? So that begs the question, when the neck is reflected, and when I say reflected, that's a term that we use in autopsies. Surgeons use it as well, but you reflect the neck, which means you do the dissection, the Y incision, and you reflect it, push it back up. And that way we're going to be looking at the organs of the neck. And could you still pick up on any hemorrhage in there, even though she's in this advanced, because he's being very specific, Dave. He's talking about utilizing a C-clamp. Well, that pressure, those pressure points are very specific to an adult male's hand. So you're going to be looking in one particular region that might only communicate with a thumb. That'll be very specific for hemorrhage here. And then you've got 4 other elements here that create a broader patch of hemorrhage in this area. So it's just something that we have to, think about.
It's just, this is one of those stories, Joe, that, on the surface, you're thinking that a guy kills his girlfriend and then lives with her body for 7 months, kind of like, Psycho, the movie Psycho.
Yeah.
And yet, really and truly, I think you're looking at a situation where he didn't know what to do. He's a 37-year-old guy who's living in his dad's basement. I'm really at a loss for what people do to one another.
Yeah.
It just boggles the mind. And I'm wondering, I do know this. This case has been adjudicated, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yep.
And why did it take so long? I mean,
well,
we're talking about years. Did the psychopathology play into this?
Joe, there's a lot that played into this, but when it came right down to it, hey man, you're set to stand trial. Okay, you can try whatever you want. You can try to play it off. No, they went with, you're good standing trial. He was convicted, Joe. I want to run down the list for you because I got it right.
Please do.
Convicted of first-degree premeditated murder, mutilation of a dead body, and concealing the death of an individual. And at trial, during the closing arguments, I kid you not, the defense actually tried to say that Lewinski was the victim, that he had been the victim of abuse at the hands of his girlfriend, even though he strangled her out, as you say, with a C-clamp. We have the argument obviously didn't work. And the prosecution pointed out, that while he's got his hand on her neck, Joe, for 5 minutes, watching the life leave her body, during that, every second he has the chance to let go. Every second for 5 minutes, he has the chance to let go. Every second is a choice to end her life. So prosecution won the case, and he is convicted of everything.
Well, it's certainly fascinating. The case in and of itself is fascinating, but you know me. I've often said, and my friends know this, and people that have followed me for some time, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts. Out of all the dead bodies I've ever been around, I've never had an apparition. I'm not begging for it. I'm just saying it never happened to me. But I do believe that places are haunted. Do you ever sit back and scratch your head and wonder if these walls could talk? I'm thinking about that condo right now. I'm thinking about the next people that might occupy that space. And if those walls could talk, what a tale they would tell. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bag.